chapter, he says, all these things and similar things, no one has real knowledge about them. Now, isn't that tragic? We have all of this, but even if we have a direct relationship with the Almighty and we've spoken to Him and we feel He's spoken to us, and we try to think back about it the next day, we know something is missing. We're not getting the full effect of it. We're doing the best we can. And the Rambam says, all these things and similar things, no one has real knowledge about them. The words of the prophets are not clear, and our sages do not have reliable traditions about them. Therefore, the discussion is based on interpretations of verses. And these are the reasons there are disputes about these issues. In any case, this is the major message of the Rambam in this part. These issues are not principal issues in religion, and one should not deal at length with Midrashim and Agadot dealing with these issues and similar issues. One should not transform them into issues of principle, for they do not bring one to the love of Hashem or the awe of Hashem. Now, after being discouraged to that extent, it's very discouraging, isn't it? But I think it leaves an opening, a very important opening. It means that it is something which is, it's a developing. The times of Mashiach are things that are developing. We have various models, and what will actually, the way things will work out depends to a great extent upon us Jews and upon us non-Jews. We all have, everything that we do is what is going to determine the way Mashiach, the times of Mashiach develop, and perhaps even the way the end of times, Olam Haba, in some terminology, the end of times will be. And it's up to us to do the best we can, and that's all we can do. And it says, Lo alecha hal melacha legmor. You don't have to, you're not going to finish the job. But it's up to you to do the best you can. And God help us all.
Uri, we need the slides.
Oh, and to introduce myself. Oh, I'm a lifelong student. I've been studying since as far back as I can, and now I'm studying a lot more people than I used to study. I studied in yeshivot I was born in the States. I came here at the age of 11 in 1948. My parents came in Aliyah. My father came before the state was declared. And my parents were not only great Zionists, they were also great Jews. In 1943, we had I remember the home, we had a three-story home in a 4-acre plot in Flatbush. When I came back in 1990, I went to see this home. There were 4 plots, and there were 4 houses on it. And sometime in 1943, Rabbi Cutler called my father and said, we have an opportunity to buy Jews out of Bergen-Belsen. And so my parents sold the house and gave the money to Rabbi Cutler, who later 1,400 Jews were bought from the Germans. And as a young man, as a child, I remember people coming to the house and say, "You're a Hollander, I owe my life to you." We moved in to Borough Park in my grandmother's attic into 2 rooms. Later, my father was a good businessman, and he managed to get another home. But in any case, this was a devotion they showed to the Jewish people. And in that time, and again in 1947, they said, this is a historic time. This is the beginning of Mashiach's time. And we want to be here. So they left everything, and they came to Israel. My father came to Palestine. My mother and I, and we children came to Israel already. My father came still in 47. And I grew up in a modern Orthodox home. I went through traditional yeshivot. Later I learned physics, theoretical physics. I chose not to go to Princeton because I thought I would probably marry an un-Jewish there. There probably weren't too many young Orthodox Jews there at the time. And I stayed in Israel and couldn't find a job in physics. So I went into industry, and I was in industry from 1965 to 1986. And then again from 1990 to 1993 to 2000. I taught in yeshivot. And I got involved in this when I came to the Sanhedrin, and we had the beginning of the relationship with the Noahides as part of the Sanhedrin. And we had the Grand Council attempt was at the time. And other people were taking care of it, and I was very happy with it, but I wasn't part of it. And then about a year later, I got called into this affair, and I've been busy with it and ever since. And I think that this is, I think I can say, I think this is really, God sent me this way. I think I'm using my abilities here, and I hope I'm doing good.
Okay. Is the mic on? Yes. I can be much shorter about who I am and what I'm doing. You gentlemen may want to move over to the side or something, because I'll be using the slides. My name is Moshe Goldberg. My connection with the NoahideWorldCenter is that I'm the English webmaster. If you people in the audience are not familiar with our website, I suggest you find where it is and look into it, because we have a lot of information, including materials by Rabbi Richmond, by Rav Sharkey. I have been studying with Rav Sharkey for the last 20 years or more, and when I found out about this, the organization that was started, I wanted to get on board, and that's what I do now. My talk is something different from what we've heard before. I want to let me start with a personal story. In 1995, during one of the lectures that Rav Sharkey gave, he took out a book that he had just translated into Hebrew from the French. And I took a copy of the book. It was a book that I couldn't put down. And then it turns out that I had a reaction like several other people had, which is this book must appear in English too. So far it has not, and I want to discuss the book and talk to you about some of the contents. I'm going to give quite a few quotes from the book here. And it turns out several other people, after reading the book, felt very strongly we need an English copy. Now, it turns out that the book was translated. This is a book that was written by Avraham Livni. I'll say a few words about him. Written in French. Rav Sharkey translated it into Hebrew. It turns out that somebody translated it into English, but it has not been published. We'll talk about that a little later, too. Okay, there's the original is Le Retour d'Israël, excuse my French accent. It was published in 1985. It has gone through its fourth printing the last year or this year. This is the book that Rav Sharkey put out, Shivat Zion Nes Lamim. Now, that's not exactly the same. The Return of Israel and the Hope of the World, that's the French, if I got it right. While Rav Sharkey's title is The Return to Zion is a Sign or a Miracle for the Nations. This was published in '95 in Hebrew. Skip, okay. A little bit about Rabbi Dr. Livni. He was born in France, born in Marseille. During the Second World War, he lived in La Chambon-sur-Lignon, which is a village in France, which, as it says, they're well known for this. They hid some 3,000 or 5,000 Jewish children or Jewish people from the Nazis, saved them. They were recognized as righteous from the other nations, however you want to say it. In 1945, he went to study math and physics, but he changed his mind, moved to theology. In some of these quotes that I'll bring, we'll see possibly some of the reasoning behind what he did. He started with theology, moved over to philosophy, went to Casablanca, Morocco, where he taught philosophy, and there he met Jews. He converted to Judaism, and we'll go into it a little bit in the quotes from the book. In 1963, he had met and married Nellie. This is his widow, and she is in the audience, I think. She spoke to me earlier. He taught in Bar Ilan University. He learned a lot from Rav Tzvi Yehuda Kook, and he passed away in 1986. What I'm going to do now is just take some quotes and try to show you the excitement of the book as I was reading it. I'm taking the quotes from the English translation, which was done by a woman soon after the book originally came out. For various reasons, it has not been published. I think it should be published. So let's go into the book. These slides are quotes from the book, and I'd like to read them with you, a few comments. I'm not sure I need many comments because the language is so powerful as far as I'm concerned. This is Avram Lively. I was 20 years old at the end of World War II when the horrors of the extermination camps were revealed. I had been informed spiritually during the oppressive war years. It was with an awareness of living through the most tragic period in history that I had to search for the paths of my spiritual maturity. And here's something that he himself wrote at the time. It sometimes seems as though man has lost all control over himself. Not only does he seem powerless to check the quasi-fatal march of events that outstrip him, but he himself seems still possessed by demoniacal forces that dominate him, and we then witness a veritable race to the abyss of a people possessed. No one knows anymore what man is. This is how he felt at the age 20. That was the situation inherited by a young Christian of 20. He's talking about himself. It was less tragic than the situation of those who, as Jews, had suffered in their flesh the ravages of the infernal machine set into motion for the final solution. But the shame and the disgust felt by those who, being Christian, had not been pursued were no less unbearable. They, as victims, could at least believe themselves innocent. But what could be said, they, the Jews, but what could be said of young Christians? Then he goes on. It was only after years of passionate struggle while pursuing my theological philosophical studies that I succeeded at last in bringing to light in all lucidity the enormity of the myth on which Christianity is built. It took me several more years to discover that the Jewish people of the Bible continue to exist. This is a theme in his book. He says people who are not Jewish do not know, do not make any connection or any link between the Jewish community, the Jews that live now, and the ancient Jews that they read about in the Bible. They are taught that it's two completely different things. He said it took him a long time to figure out that they're the same people, that we, the Jews now, are the same people as the ones that were in the Bible. I know now for certainty that only Jews rooted in their spiritual heritage can scrutinize in all lucidity the malady that afflicts modern civilization. They alone can analyze without hatred and without bias the error that has corrupted Christianity from the beginning. And he has a lot in the book, we'll get back to that, about Christianity and its error and the errors that it sends along or teaches other people. What impressed him, as we saw before, what impressed him at the young age of between 15 and 20, he uses the word Auschwitz, but he means Auschwitz and the Holocaust totally. He says, if Hiroshima puts into question the physical survival of mankind, Auschwitz poses a moral problem, that of the spiritual future of a civilization that had given rise to the monstrous horror of the gas chamber. Unfortunately, Auschwitz has been drowned in that of Hiroshima. People compare Auschwitz and Hiroshima. He said they're completely different. Auschwitz is something else. Not only the cruelty, barbarity, and primitive and criminal madness that was capable of contorting man's moral judgment, by stifling his intellect and his reasoning powers in order to change him into a killer. Auschwitz is the logical, methodical, and systematically organized implementation of the final solution for the express purpose of exterminating the Jewish people. It says if there were pogroms, there were a bunch of people got together. It wasn't an organized thing, and it didn't have the purpose of an entire nation altogether. Auschwitz is not the simple product of the barbarity of man. It is of a nature totally distinct from all the great crimes of history. Pogroms pose the problem of religious fanaticism combined with ignorance and sanguinary instincts, and that is, he says, a moral problem. However, Auschwitz puts into question the very foundations of Western civilization. 2,000 years of Christian civilization alone had made possible such complicity or such silence. To speak of the silence of God at Auschwitz, he says, is a specious contention. Don't ask why God was silent. The real problem, and the only problem, is the silence of man, or rather the deafness of man. God cried out, and prophetic spirits shouted themselves hoarse to warn of the imminence of the catastrophe, but man was deaf. He says the prophets, we heard this before from Rabbi Hollander, the prophets have been speaking to us continuously. They left a message, and people should be hearing the message, should have heard it throughout the years, from Sinai through the redemption in Egypt and through 2,000 years of Jewish history. And people didn't listen. Man was deaf. Did Christianity replace Israel? He says that's what Christianity claims. As a former Christian, I have more than others the right and duty to clearly identify this disease. He says this idea that Christianity is taken over from Israel, from the Bnei Israel, he identifies it as a disease. No matter what one may think, it is not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is only a symptom. What is the malady? The malady of the world, most of the world. It is the theological lie on which Christianity is built. The theological myth built up around the Son of Jesus, transformed into Christ, and the myth of an Israel that has run its course, denying to the people of Israel the role of educator and redeemer. He's come to the conclusion that the Jews have a mission. We'll get to that as we go along. And the way the Christian world has been organized doesn't let the Jews do their mission. The mythical transfer of the historical mission assumed by the Jewish people in the service of mankind to the person of a deified Jesus eliminates all justification for the continued existence of the Jewish people. And if there's no justification for the Jewish people to exist, you send them to Auschwitz and you get rid of them. The Christian faith, the Christian belief that the Messiah already came 2,000 years ago, when all that was his so-called advent brought in its wake was wars, crusades, chaos, and hatred towards the Jews, only goes to prove that Christian messianism and Jewish messianism are diametrically opposed in their very essence. One believes itself to be the outgrowth of the other. Okay? Christianity claims the scriptures for its own, but this apparent proximity only accentuates still further the differences between them. So gross and primitive is the copy that this proximity is utterly intolerable to Judaism. There's a whole section in the book about prophecy, and the rabbis spoke about some of this stuff before, and it's interesting that it comes up in the same way in his book. Again, very important concepts here. With the appearance of Abraham, not only a new moral vocation suddenly springs up in history, but also a dimension hitherto buried and stifled in man. Okay? Abraham was the first one to hear prophecy of the way that the prophets later continued for hundreds of years in the land of Israel. Abraham is the man capable of listening to and hearing the word of God. In the end, I may say a few words about that. It is not the inner voice of the conscience, but the transcendent, compelling voice that leaves no doubt as to its origin. Let's go on. Prophecy is in effect such an integral part of the Hebraic consciousness that its absence is felt as painfully as the absence of inspiration in the poet. However, while poetic inspiration remains bound to the personal sensitivity of a poet, prophetic inspiration concerns the moral evolution of a nation, and through it, the evolution of the human race. It is doubtless necessary to emphasize one obvious truth. Jewish prophecy has nothing in common with divination or fortune-telling, as is found among other peoples. The Navi, the prophet, is charged with transmitting a message to the people. And we, the whole world, have to listen to this message, and that's what the prophet has to do. In truth, he says, in truth, nothing would be more absolute, or more absurd, than a world without prophetic revelation, abandoned to silence reality. Likewise, it would be the ultimate absurdity to believe that the world could be the fortuitous product of chance and so on. He says it cannot be that there is no prophecy. Prophecy is a message to the world. How could God create an entire world without telling us, the people, what He wants of us and what we have to do? This establishment of the State of Israel, he talks quite a bit in the book, based on studies from Rav Kook and so on, about the fact that we, Israel, must be on the land of Israel. The establishment of the State of Israel filled the vacuum that had been created in the history of civilization. The Zionist movement would be making a foolish error if it imagined that its role were limited to creating a little Switzerland in the Middle East or a model of democracy and socialism. If it is Israel's destiny to establish itself in the Holy Land, it is in order to put into practice this teaching and spread its message far and wide. He says, we, Israel now, must build up a nation here and use that as the root of teaching mankind how to build a moral world. While Israel is cognizant of the significance of its journey through history, the peoples, in contrast, are still ignorant of the sense of their global adventure. Israel knows because it possesses the prophetic message, but this knowledge also incurs responsibility. Sinai would lose its meaning completely if it were not linked with Zion. Zion now, today, is a continuation of the prophecy of Abraham, through the events at Sinai, through thousands of years, here we are, 4,000 years of history. Only a people which has inherited a vocation so profoundly bound up with its very existence could survive the incredible difficulties of its historical destiny. For Israel, vocation and destiny are but the two inseparable aspects of a single reality, accomplishing its historic mission. I'm not sure that vocation really is the best word in English, because I feel that it means more somebody's work. Here, I think it's used in the sense in the original French. Vocation here means a divine mission, a mission given by God, that somebody has to accomplish something. One could say, from the perspective of the Midrash, that Auschwitz and the Hitlerian catastrophe placed before the Jewish people as well as all mankind the possibility of an end to the world and a return to chaos. Israel is not a superfluous luxury that human history could do without. We are needed here. We have a role to play, and the role is coming to fruition. The fact that we have built a country here and a land here may not be perfect yet, but it's on the way. It's the fulfillment of the prophecies. 35 years after the Nazi catastrophe, and 2,500 years after the prophecy, The Jewish people possesses a past long enough and rich enough in blessings and curses to appreciate the actuality of Ezekiel's threat. Yechezkel, I will bring you into the wilderness of the peoples. I will enter into judgment with you face to face. Endowed with a wider view of the past than the other peoples, mired in the present, Israel draws from its memory a more acute awareness of the sense of the human adventure and its dynamic. All the prophets were visionaries of the future, not prisoners of the past. He has long sections, I didn't even try to bring them out here, long sections in the book showing that the prophets did not give a prophecy for their time. It was a prophecy leading up to the return to Zion today, where we are now. It's precisely because they were capable of discerning the veritable dynamic of history that they were also able to pierce the iron curtains apparently blocking the vision of the societies of their time. Let's go on here. This is his summary of the book. I'm going to read it slowly, and with that we'll finish the book, and I have a few more comments. This then is the ultimate goal of the return. Its horizons may seem to be far beyond the petty politics and trivial issues that preoccupy the Zionist movement. Nonetheless, Zionism has a specific role to play in the meta-historical framework of the Great Return, whose universal dimension was clearly shown long ago by the prophets. The sages saw the first manifestation of the return in the renewed fertility of the land over a century ago. Now, time is running out. He says, he wrote this 30 years ago. It's time for us all to take action. The Jewish people seems to be falling behind with the fulfillment of the grand design. He says, get on your horse, get moving. It is being carried out in an atmosphere of crisis, catastrophes, and enormous upheavals. The juxtaposition of the Nazi genocide and the establishment of the State of Israel is no simple accident of history. Now that the dream of return has become a reality, the Jewish people can no longer ignore its predestined mission to rebuild in the land of promise the morality and spirituality mankind needs in order to survive. The time of return is also a time of breaches and divisions resulting from the tension between the new forces of liberation, of transcendent origin, and the reactionary forces of a decadent human society. The new world of the return thus emerges slowly from the womb of an important degraded world, so morally impotent degraded world, thank you, so morally corrupt after the Nazi horror that it does not hesitate to equate terrorism with the legitimate rights of peoples. He wrote that 30 years ago. It's clearly still true today. It is the Jewish people's destiny to break loose from all the restraints imposed upon it by its exile, woven from all of the alienations of a world incapable of finding the key to its salvation. For that it must take hold of the transcendent forces made visible in the reality of the return that have strewn the path of Israel's rebirth with manifest miracles. The liberation effectuated by the return concerns all peoples. And this is his message, and it's a message that is powerful, and when I saw it in this book, I couldn't put it down. The return of Israel is, in truth, the hope of the world, the only path to its salvation, the salvation not of Israel, but the salvation of the entire world. I want to end with two short notes. And God said to Abram, go for yourself from your land. Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha. The commentaries ask or point out that as opposed to others that are picked in the Torah for doing something, picked as a prophet, picked as a representative of some kind, take Noach. We talk about B'nai Noach. Noach, there's a whole section in the Torah explaining that Noach was a righteous man, therefore he was picked. Avram, it doesn't do that. It says, Vayomer Hashem el Avram. Out of the blue, God spoke to Avram. The Svat Emet, who was a Hasidic Rebbe, lived from the 1860s to 1905, something like that. He says why is it that there's no explanation of why Avram was picked? He says, because he was not picked. He says, Vayomer Hashem el Avram lech lecha. God says to Avram, go from your land. Everybody is getting that message. God is telling the same thing to the whole world all the time. God has been telling it to the world for the last 2,000 years. But only Avram heard. Avram was attuned enough so that he could hear the message. Avram Livni, his namesake, who wrote this book, is clearly an example of a person who, when he saw the entire message going all around the world,